Welcome on back, everybody, to the All Aussie Rules YouTube channel. This is the Collingwood Magpies 2024 review video. The season has come to an end for Collingwood, so we'll be jumping into all the stats, all the numbers, all the players behind what happened in 2024 for the Collingwood Magpies. As always, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, jump in the comments below. Let me know what you think of Collingwood's season this year. And yeah, let's jump straight into it. Also, plenty of other socials. Go check them out as well. At All Aussie Rules everywhere. Collingwood's season, 12 wins, 9 losses, 2 draws, finished 9th on the ladder, missed finals, which is obviously a disappointing result for them after playing in the finals and winning the Premiership last year. Of course, exactly what Sydney did. Exactly what Geelong did last year, having won the Premiership the year before, missing finals the next year. So not unheard of. Also, 12 wins, 2 draws. That's equivalent of 13 wins in total points. And to miss finals with that is a little bit unlucky in some regards, but it was a close competition this year, so there's plenty of hard luck stories across the competition. We'll go match by match. As you can see, through the middle part and at the end, their season was pretty good. There was two glaring parts of their season that let them down for sure. So they started really poorly, 3 losses in a row. GWS, when they kicked poorly. Sydney, which they just got outplayed fully by Sydney that day in round 1. And then they got beaten by St Kilda in another game that potentially they could have won if they had played a little, maybe converted chances, played a little better. They weren't bringing enough pressure, according to their coach, and they certainly turned that around the following week. They then beat Brisbane, Hawthorn, had a bye, then beat Port Adelaide, had a draw in the Anzac Day clash before beating Carlton, West Coast, Adelaide. So after 10 rounds, they had certainly resurrected their season, having won through six wins and a draw from the last 7 matches. They then drew against Fremantle when leading by about 3 or 4 goals with 10 minutes to play. Let themselves down on that occasion. The Doggies, they were also beating at 3/4 time and just didn't run the game out. Kind of happened quite a few times throughout their season, so certainly a costly factor was just a few games, just not running the games out, which certainly wasn't an issue for them in 2023. No, everyone knows how good they were in the last quarter last year. They then went into the bye with a win against Melbourne and a win against North Melbourne, however lucky that one in round 14 was, having been 9 goals down in the third quarter. They came back and just snuck the win. So they went into the bye in a really strong spot, sitting in the top 4, season looking pretty good. I think slightly better than they probably maybe deserved to be based on what they'd done for the season. They hadn't been that convincing too often outside of the Port Adelaide win, and I mean the West Coast one was pretty easy, and maybe the Melbourne one was pretty comfortable as well, but most of the rest was pretty close. But that's how they play football last year and the year before, so not that surprising. They came out of the bye and they just struggled, but weren't terrible. 11-point loss to Gold Coast. They were right in that. I think they hit the front with about 6 minutes to go before Gold Coast kicked the last couple. The Essendon one, they were 6 goals down. Looked like it was over. They flooded home. Only lost by 12 in the end, but a loss nonetheless. Geelong kind of kept about that 20-point margin most of the game. And then their bad game, their worst game of the year, was against Hawthorn. They went down by 66 points, and that looked like that was season over for them. They still had a chance to play finals. If they had won every game, they would have played finals. But yeah, that was a really bad day. In the wet, they just got outplayed, outran, out-tackled, out-everythinged by Hawthorn. They just controlled that game. They then had Richmond beat them, beat Carlton in Scotty Pendlebury's 400th by 3 points. They then went to Sydney. Looked like they were going to win that one. They were up by about 4 goals in the last quarter. Didn't run it out though. For probably the 3rd or 4th time this season. Just didn't run out of 4th quarter and lost a game. Some controversial decisions, but that's football. And then they finished the season with a win against Brisbane in round 23 by 1 point, in an all-time classic, one where they kicked a couple late, flooded home after looking like they were done, and then finished round 24 with a win by 46 points against Melbourne. So they played Melbourne twice, got 2 comfortable wins. Ended up just missing out on finals by percentage. So only got themselves to blame. A few losses that perhaps they shouldn't have lost, but in the end, that's football. They finished 9th on the ladder. We look at their last 3 years. Obviously, the trajectory of this year wasn't great. 2022, 16 wins, 6 losses. Finished 4th on the ladder, made a prelim, missed out on a grand final by less than a kick. Was it a point? Can't even remember. I've blanked it out of my memory. But yeah, lost to Sydney that day in a prelim up in Sydney. Last year, obviously 18-5, finished top of the ladder, went on to win the Premiership. This year, 12 wins, 9 losses, 2 draws, 9th on the ladder. Not terrible. Slightly above average players used pretty much every season, 38, 37, 37. Average is usually 35 to 36-ish. Sometimes it sneaks towards 37. Average age is certainly getting on. They are now well and truly the oldest team in the competition. When I say well and truly, Geelong aren't that far behind them, but still a decent gap. And experience-wise, sneaking up as well. Most experienced team, 128 games. I mean, that's boosted by, you look at Scott Pendlebury and Steel Sidebottom, they have well over 700 games between them, so that certainly boosts the numbers. They did play a lot of young players at times throughout season 2024. Look at some of the stats behind Collingwood. There's a lot here, but we'll just have a look at some of the key points. Obviously, last year was a really good season, plus 20 points difference, whereas this year it was only plus 2. I think I don't know. Last year was a really good year. 2022 to 2024 will be interesting to look at some of those stats. Like their accuracy against them this year was insane. Like that 59.69% against them. Teams just really kicked straight against them, which is crazy. You look at the disposal numbers, not that dissimilar from 2022. From minus 19 to minus 26 isn't that big of a jump. Their disposal efficiency this year was one of the key things that really let them down. 69.8 when your opposition are going at 73.4 is a very big difference right there. Inside 50s, they also struggled in that area. Minus 2.6, whereas the last 2 years they've been in front of the 8 ball with that. Metres gained dropped off quite a long way too, minus 330 from last year, so that's well and truly, that's almost basically 2 football fields. Actually, kind of is over 2 football fields. So that's quite a big difference. Turnover game's an area of the game that they've kind of dominated, to be honest, turnover to intercept ratio, the last 3 years, and this year was no different. First 15 weeks, 12 weeks, they were really good in this area outside of the game against Sydney. But they had about a 6-7 week period there, not even that long, probably 4 or 5 weeks when out of the bye where they just were losing that most weeks, and that really cost them in the end. Those 4 losses in those 4 weeks, culminating in that Hawthorn loss, was just the end of their season basically, and that's where I personally think it happened, was just their inability to control that turnover game, which is something that they'd been really good at lately, or the last 3 years. Contested footy, not too bad. They've never been that great of a team in contested footy. Uncontested footy, they got smacked a bit, but at the same time, it's once again not one of their better areas. Hard ball gets stayed similar to last year. Loose ball gets dropped off a little bit. Clearance-wise, I think they overall improved in the clearance game, mainly through centre clearances were better. Stoppage clearances, much the same, but centre clearances, somehow they improved. We'll get to the scoring sources in a minute, and it's interesting to see that because, those numbers don't really correlate with their clearances. We'll also get into that a little bit when we're talking about some of the players for Collingwood this year. The factor that kept them in games was their forward efficiency this year. Led the league. 53.5% was really huge. Defensively, 47.3 isn't great. They had a few blowouts where they didn't do so well defensively in their defensive 50, but more than made up for that most of the time with their really good forward efficiency. When you look at 2022, it's improved by 9%. If they go up 53% in the forward line again next year, I would be very surprised if they don't make finals and also don't make top 4. Tackle game, that's where they're bread and butter. +8 per game last year, +9.4 this year. Kept them in games, no doubt about it. Their tackling pressure was insane. Has been for a couple of years, so this year was no different. Tackles inside 50, dominated that. Pressure acts, they're really, really high on that pressure gauge. And I think the biggest improvement here on an individual and stat line basis maybe is their ruck work. Hit-outs, Darcy Cameron went huge this year, massively improved. He was good last year, don't get me wrong, but this year was a lot more consistent, a lot more better overall. As you can see, last year hit-outs were pretty similar from between them and their opponents. This year they were +7 per game. Hit-outs to advantage went up to +1.7 per game, which is a really good number. So even these are better numbers than they had when Brodie Grundy was there in 2022. So just a sign that they're really improving. He's really improving, sorry. Not them, because they dropped off a cliff when you look at certain things. Mainly the scoring, but I think that's led by just a lapse in a couple stats at certain times, like the turnover game just out of the bye. They never bought it. Never were able to control those 4 or 5 weeks out of the bye in that regard. And their accuracy dropped, and opposition's accuracy went from 44.4% last year to 59.7%, which is a huge jump. Their score sources, kick-ins slightly improved offensively but dropped defensively, so net 0 really. Scoring from stoppages, this is what I was saying, improved in actual centre clearances, but their scoring from centre bounce didn't improve, so that's a slight issue, I guess. Maybe questions what their follow-up work was from their centre bounces, but we'll also have a look at their forward line as well, which was obviously very disrupted this season. Defensively also dropped off, so stoppages certainly got worse in terms of scoring. Turnovers, as we said, probably not quite as good, certainly out of the bye, and dropped offensively and defensively there. Scores from the defensive half dropped off the cliff. Lost 10 points offensively while also conceding an extra 5. So that's 2.5 goals from defensive half transition. So that's a really big drop off. But however, their forward half really improved offensively, +9, but also went -7. So defensively, so only +2 in that regard. And centre bounces, as I said, dropped off offensively, stayed about the same defensively. We'll now jump into some of the players. We start with players that missed 5 or more games this season. Some of these are key players, some of them are fringe players, some of them missed games due to form or just not being good enough. But these are the players that have a solid AFL rating, really, that missed games. So Dan McStay obviously missed the first 18 weeks. No, I think he missed the first 17 and then he missed 1 later on. With the ACL that he did in the off-season. So he was a key loss for them, no doubt about it. Tom Mitchell missed 17, hurt his foot in about round 5 or 6, and never was able to get back onto the field, disappointingly for him, but he'll be a handy inclusion for them next year when he's back. Joe Richards missed 14 through injury, and I don't think he debuted until mid-season anyway. Finn McRae missed a lot of games playing in the VFL. Just wasn't quite up to standard according to Fly. Lockie Sullivan, he debuted around round 6 or 7. No, 8 I think, round 8 against Carlton. Missed 13 games for the year. Brodie Myercheck, obviously, he's a key forward as well. who would have played every game but missed 12, sorry. Oleg Markov missed a few due to various reasons, but missed 11 for the season. Harvey Harrison missed 11 as well. Jordan De Goey missed 10. Jamie Elliott 8. Mason Cox 7. Bo McQuarrie 6 and Billy Frampton 5. So some big names on that list. Some not so big, but you look at that list there, you say Dan McStay, Tom Mitchell, Brody Mychek, Jordan De Goey, Jamie Elliott, Bo McQuarrie are all definitely in their best 23, and then borderline are probably most of the rest. Joe Richards certainly is right there. Finn McRae's potentially at times. Harvey Harrison's probably certainly in their best 23, I think. And as is Mason Cox and Billy Frampton. So quite a few games missed overall for their season there. We jump into the best players by position. Starting in the key defence line, Darcy Moore, he played every game, slightly dropped in terms of AFL rating from last year. Copped a bit of flack during mid-season, especially when Collingwood was struggling a bit about his form. I don't think it was as bad as people made out. He didn't have as much support down there this year, there's no doubt about it. We know Nathan Murphy. And Jeremy Howe went forward at times. Those young defenders, Billy Frampton went through there, Charlie Dean went through there. So he just had to change his role a little bit and maybe didn't do the best job at that. But overall, I still think he had a very solid season and is very crucial for Collingwood in that back line. His reading of the play, his spoiling is outstanding. So I think he's crucial back there. Jeremy Howe, he had a good year, no doubt about it. I think he was better this year than last year, but I mean, he missed half of last year, whereas he only missed 4 games this year with a hammy. So he played really well. Charlie Dean showed plenty of potential as a young key back. He played the first 2 rounds, I think, before getting dropped. I think those first 2 games were... Maybe he wasn't quite up to par. His positioning was pretty good, but I thought he just... lacked a little bit in the finishing touches in one-on-one contests, but he came back and showed a lot better signs, I think, in the second half. Key forwards, Brody Mychek. Only played 11 games, but it lived up to what he does best down there. He's not a world beater, but he gets the job done, no doubt about it. But yeah, just missed too many games. Dan McStay doesn't even make the list here, but he missed a lot of football. Once again, came in, did his job, but wasn't a world beater. It'll be interesting to see if he can take his game to the next level next year. Their medium defenders, Braden Maynard, he was very good this year, I think. Certainly in the first half of the year was very good. His second half was still solid. Overall, good year from him. John Noble, this is a big one because he had a good year this year, there's no doubt about it. I think he improved on what he did last year, which was really pretty solid running backman. But he's requested a trade up to Gold Coast, so that's going to hurt Collingwood next year, I think. Be interesting to see where they go, who they put into that position. Might be an option. I mean, they saw Steele Sidebottom go back there at times. Josh Dacos tried it as well. Maybe they do need to rotate one of their midfielders or even their medium forwards back there. See how they go. Because otherwise they may be a running backman short. Oleg Markov, well, we skipped someone, but we'll do Oleg first. He wasn't as good as he was last year, in my opinion. He dropped off quite a bit. Isaac Quainer, he was solid without doing anything great. He had quite a few quiet games. His best is still very good, but he didn't quite go as well as last year, I don't think. Their medium forwards, interesting, Joe Richards is their highest rated one. This is probably their strongest position and probably a key reason why they didn't fight so hard to keep Jack Ginnivan is because small forwards is what they have plenty of. Joe Richards played 9 games. He showed plenty. Potentially getting offered deals from Port Adelaide apparently, so it'll be interesting to see if he stays. I think Collingwood probably need to do whatever they can to keep him because I think he could be a very important player going forward. Bobby Hill, his season was a bit down on last year. Kicked plenty of goals. but they kind of came in bulk games. Like, there were a lot of games where he didn't kick a goal, I think. He kicked 5 against North Melbourne, which were crucial goals, don't get me wrong. He kicked 3 against Brisbane the first time they played him, and those kind of were really good games, but he had quite a few quiet ones as well. Overall, his rating wasn't as high as last year. Will Hoskin-Elliott's the kind of throw him anywhere that you need him sort of player. He plays the wing, he plays medium forward. He played a little bit of half-back flank as well. He had a really good season and will be important for them maybe next year, especially if they do need another running back. Maybe he's someone that can go into that role. Beau McQuarrie didn't develop as much as I thought he might this year. He's still pretty young, so still plenty of opportunity for that. I think he's someone that probably wants to get into the midfield a bit more as he progresses, but we'll see how that goes. Jamie Elliott dropped off a little bit on last year. He missed a little bit of football. Certainly, well, when I say a little bit, he missed 8 games through the middle of the season. His season was still solid without being a world beater. Harvey Harrison showed snippets of what he can do. He ended up doing his ACL, I think, so he missed a fair bit of football late. But I think he's got potential as well. And Lachie Schultz is probably one of the most publicised players on the Collingwood list. I think he cops a lot of unwarranted slack, in all honesty, but his rating clearly dropped from Fremantle days. Adjusting to the new team, it's a different role than he had at Fremantle. Fremantle, it was about kicking goals. At Collingwood, there's a lot more emphasis on their small forwards defending and what they can do in regards to their defence. And overall, he was pretty good in that sort of way. He turned it over a bit too many times. There's no doubt about that. But his defensive work was pretty solid, in my opinion. I'm just trying to find some of his stats. 17 pressure acts per game, which is pretty solid. Only behind like 2 or 3 Collingwood players who were all midfielders. He did a solid job without being a world beater. I think we'll see more improvement from him next year. To be honest, another year in the system at Collingwood, he'll learn his role a bit better. Medium forwards, mid forwards. Pat Lipinski had a great season. He didn't miss a game. He improved. I think he's one of the key players that did improve for Collingwood. Finn McRae, he's in an interesting one. Dominates VFL, comes into the AFL, shows glimmers, but overall gets dropped. A lot of Collingwood fans want to see him given a better go. I think his biggest issue that he has is his turnovers and sometimes his decision making. He can be really, really good though, so I'd like to see them stick with him, give him another go, and hopefully he takes it. Jump into the midfielders. Nick Dacos was outstanding. Improved, I think, in every way this year. Last year he was outstanding. This year I think he was even better. For early year, did his normal job that he did last year. Then once Collingwood lost Tom Mitchell, Jordan De Goey for parts, and other people through the midfield, he had to take on that more contested football style. Ended up leading the league at contested football at one stage. Ended up second, I think, in the AFL for contested possessions. Had to increase his clearance rate as well because they were just missing those big inside midfielders that certainly changed the way he had to play. So his disposal efficiency dropped, but I think understand that when you see that he had to change his role. Jack Crisp was outstanding, had another good year. I think he was a bit slow to start early year, but certainly got himself going. Pendlebury dropped off a little bit, but I mean, he's 37 years old. Like, he's done everything in the game. He continues to do everything in the game. And a rating of 12.26 AFL champion data rating at that age is an incredible effort. Ed Allen only played a couple games, but was pretty solid, certainly in that last week. Jordan De Goey, he missed a lot of football. His rating was probably down as well as missing the football, even without that. Had a few injuries, but he played a couple good games, but just maybe was a bit quiet in others. Hopefully, for Collingwood's sake, he bounces back next year. Josh Dacos was solid on the wing. Not quite up to the levels of his best and fairest year last year, but still pretty solid. Tom Mitchell, as I said, missed a lot of football. Certainly only played the first 6 weeks, and then I don't think he was playing again. He was good-ish. Wasn't as good as he was last year in those games, but I think, he'll maybe bounce back next year. We'll see. I certainly would expect to see him play more football than 6 games. Still side bottom. Interestingly, he dropped off a little bit. After about 5-6 weeks, he was a lot lower than that. His second half of the season was very good. Once he was moved behind ball in about round 9, from then on, he looked a lot better. He didn't stay behind the ball for the rest of the season, but those games gave him confidence, and then he moved back to the wing and a little bit in the forward line, and certainly improved. Lockie Sullivan, as a first-year player, mature age player, did his role without setting the world on fire. And then the ruckman, as we have already mentioned, Darcy Cameron, Collingwood's most improved player, was outstanding. His ruck work was great. His ability to get forward, kick goals. He was named in the All-Australian squad, so that's a great reward for a good season. I don't know if I had him in my top 3 ruckman this year. In fact, I didn't. I think I had him 5th overall as ruckman, but that's still a really good season. I think from where he was last year, where he was good, but he certainly wasn't in the top 5. He would have been about 10th last year, I reckon, so a good improvement there. And Mason Cox missed a bit of football, was okay, but once again, certainly not a world beater. I think Collingwood need to probably start looking at if they can replace his role a little bit, maybe find someone else that can do the pinch hitting in the ruck and go forward and get a little bit more output, because Mason Cox certainly isn't getting any younger, and I wouldn't see him playing beyond 2025 in my opinion, which might be the case for quite a few of their players. One last slide to look at. It's the players that were there in 2023 that aren't there in 2024. We lead off with Taylor Adams. He went up to Sydney for more opportunity and a 2-year deal, and he hurt Collingwood leaving in the end. With all the injuries that they had, he would have been someone that could have been swung into more of a midfield role in those early parts of the year when Tom Mitchell went down and Jordan De Goey was missing games and stuff. He would have been someone they could have chucked in the middle and allowed Nick Dacos to not have to carry the load so much at the clearance game and the hard contested football. But as it turns out, he's gone to Sydney for more opportunity. Has that worked out for him? We'll see. Obviously, Sydney are going to be playing in a prelim final. If he can get his way back into that team, I'm sure he'll be happy that he left. Jack Ginnivan, his rating surprisingly hasn't really changed that much for the amount of hype that has been around him this year. He's been very good for Hawthorn, don't get me wrong, but his rating hasn't really improved. But he's playing in a semi-final. He's had a great year, no doubt about it. He was in a position where Collingwood probably could afford to lose someone. And in all honesty, is his output much better than what Lockie Schultz did? Probably not, in my opinion. But that's all an opinion-based thing. And then a couple of retirees, neither by choice, both due to concussions. Nathan Murphy, 7.75 rating as a key defender last year. He certainly was missed in their back line. There's no doubt about that. He was like the glue that kind of allowed everybody else to be more the playmaker types. He was the dour defender that just got the job done. And Josh Carmichael, who was a young player, didn't get many opportunities. So, yeah, he's also out. And that wraps up all the numbers, all the players, all the stats for Collingwood. This was a bit longer of a video than most of the other teams, probably because I have so many opinions on Collingwood. But yeah, where are they going to be next year? They could do what Geelong did. Geelong obviously won a premiership, missed finals. They've bounced back there into a prelim, and going to be a good chance for a grand final and a premiership. So there a chance Collingwood do that? I think certainly yes. A bit more luck with injuries, a better start to their season. They get a full off season this year, which will certainly help them as well, I think, after a couple big campaigns. So just a reset, re-go. I wouldn't write them off. It'll be interesting to see how their off-season goes, though. Jump in the comments below. Let me know where you see Collingwood finishing next year. I would be surprised if they miss the finals next year. I think they at least finish top 7, I think. But we'll see what happens. Let me know in the comments below what you think. Don't forget to follow me on all my social medias. And also, podcast goes live twice a week, Mondays and Fridays on YouTube and Spotify. Thanks for tuning in. I'll be back with videos all week, every day at the moment, all the way through till pretty much grand final day. We've got videos almost every day, so check them all out. Thanks for watching. Catch us on the next one.